we are ready to start our next session, which is Advanced SEO Reporting Tools, Tips, and Techniques. And I'm very happy to introduce Dana DiTomaso, founder and lead instructor at KP Playbook. Dana, thanks a lot for joining us. Great having you today. The stage is yours.
Thank you
Please
so much
welcome.
for having me. Thank you. It's so great to be here. And I love that this is a day focused on agencies, because I find that at conferences, there's a mix of in-house and agency people. And while, when I'm talking to a more general audience, I try to say, this could be to your boss or this could be to your client. But the reality is that we have really different, expectations and whatnot in terms of how we communicate with clients. So today I'm hoping that I can go into that more with everybody. All right. So let's get it rolling. All right. So, if you don't know who I am, hello, my name is Dana DiTomaso. As mentioned, I'm the founder and lead instructor at Kickpoint Playbook. I'm also the president of Kickpoint, which is a digital marketing agency. I've been working in this field for 24 years. You can see all the gray hair. Honestly, it has never been harder to work in SEO than it is right now. And, of course, when we get great results for our clients in this really difficult time in SEO, we want to show them how good we're doing, right? And that can be extremely difficult to do so. So this is what I'm going to go through today. Whoops, hit the wrong button. Okay. So I'm going to start, though, with a really upbeat note. I regret to inform you that your analytics data is wrong. I mean, wrong might be overstating it a little bit. I am saying this for dramatic effect, of course, but the data that you are relying on for those reports is not accurate. And it also hasn't been accurate for quite some time. And I think this is why people got really frustrated with the transition from Universal Analytics to GA4, because they were looking at this data and saying, well, here's Universal Analytics, and it says that I have this many users and this many sessions and this many goals. And then they're over here in GA4 and they're saying, but GA4 says that I have this many users and this many sessions and this many conversions are now key events. Which one is right? And the answer was that they're both right, because they were measuring data in different ways. But I think that GA4 really showed us how fragile analytics can be when it comes to measurement, and how dependent on the model that the measurement is taking can change the results that you get. And of course, the other problem with analytics as well is that it's getting worse. Google, of course, pushed off this whole third-party cookie thing again. I feel like Google's thinking, if we just keep pushing this off, people will forget we suggested it in the first place, right? No, they're going to have to figure it out. But people think that because Google pushed this off, we still have third-party cookies. Everything is okay. But it's not. Tools like Safari and Opera and Brave, those browsers haven't had third-party cookies for a while. And analytics products like GA4 were already using first-party cookies and have been using first-party cookies for years. So that isn't actually the culprit here. So the question I have for you is, how many of you refuse cookies? When you visit a website, do you consent to tracking, or do you say functional only? You probably maybe turn off all tracking and you don't care. You probably are one of those people who is causing us to not have accurate analytics. And even if you say yes to tracking, how many of you use an ad blocker? You probably use an ad blocking extension in your browser. I have one right now. And if you didn't use one 5 years ago, you might be using one now. All of this makes our data increasingly more inaccurate. And I actually have a recent survey that was done just this year for Americans. 52% of Americans use an ad blocker, which is a shockingly high amount. But I have to say, based on what I see, this lines up. And especially if you work in a technical field, or if you work with advertisers, 66% of us are using ad blockers. We are the problem here, right? This is just deep, deep irony when it comes to poor tracking on websites. And I got sent this great meme from Wisdom Graded In. He said, I was on a rant on the Search with Candor podcast about, how we don't let ourselves be tracked, but we want to track everybody else. And of course, I use an ad blocker. You probably use an ad blocker. We are the problem. But the result of this means that you're making decisions, critical decisions about your clients, and also presenting your clients with only half of their actual data. In fact, based on my course website, the kpplaybook.com, Kickpoint Playbook, let me tell you what we actually see. I sell courses to digital marketers. Y'all love your ad blockers. Only half of purchases show up at all in GA4. And of that half of them are showing up attributed to direct, even when I'm sure that person must have found us via organic or ads originally. So for us, that means that only 25% of our data is actually showing up. So now that I've laid out this depressing reality of analytics in 2024, how can you demonstrate SEO impact in the reports that you create? So you might think I'm going to turn to Google and I'm going to Google SEO reporting template. And there's all these like pretty pictures of different kinds of templates that you can bring. And sure, some of these might get you somewhere a little bit, but ultimately what you bring to the table isn't data, it's insights. The data is in the tool. Your job as an agency is to bring insights to your clients, which I know can seem difficult because you're like, but I have to scale, and scaling means that I have to automate things. And I actually see a question right now about automating SEO reporting. Like, yeah, you can also automate insights, but the idea is that you build your reports in a way so that they are delivering insights. And what do I mean by an insight? And some of you might be like, yes, I know this, but just to be totally clear, because sometimes when I talk to people, especially people who are relatively new working in the agency world, there's a real distinction between bringing data and bringing an insight. So for example, you had 820 sessions last month from organic search. That isn't an insight. That's just data. Your client could have found that out themselves. They could have gone in GA4. They probably won't, but they could have. And they could have found this out themselves. They didn't need you to find that out. And when you bring that kind of insight or data to a client, what happens is you're setting yourself up as a vendor, not a consultant. And truly what builds a great agency relationship between you and your client is you presenting yourself as a consultant, someone they can go to and find out things. And more than once, in my career, many, many times when a client has switched from one agency to another, ultimately what they say in the call is, the other agency just wasn't telling me anything I didn't already know. They weren't giving me any insights. I had to go to them with questions. They weren't giving me any ideas. And this kind of reporting, which may be what you're reporting on now, is exactly the kind of data that eventually ends up souring the relationship between you and your client. Instead, presenting this kind of data is better. Trackable visitors from organic search are 28% more likely to get in touch with you. That's an insight. This says, we've looked at the data. We know that your key metric is people getting in touch with you. That is the thing that drives your business forward. And we know that people who come to the site via organic search are more likely to get in touch with you than any other channel out there. And as your SEO agency, of course, you want to make sure you're driving high quality organic search for your clients. So by saying the work that we're doing for you means that you are getting an above average amount of people coming to the site and getting in touch with you, this is an insight for the client. It's something that's a little bit harder to find in the basic reports. It's something that actually brings value to the table when you're discussing results with the client. Because ultimately, the reports that you build should answer your client's questions. And one of the most common questions a client is going to have is, am I getting my money's worth when I work with you? Right? That's what they want to know. They pay you a bunch of money, especially if you work with smaller businesses. You may be their entire marketing budget. They are placing their business, their baby, their life's work in your hands directly. And by showing them that you respect that level of trust, by answering their questions and coming to them with insights and coming to them with ideas, you can strengthen and deepen that relationship. So here's one of those reporting templates that I got when I Googled, what question is this template actually answering? And I thought about putting a big X on the slide because I don't want you to create this. I can't even remember what site I got this from. But a template like this is just like, here's a bunch of data. Here's some keyword performance. Here's some channel traffic. From an SEO perspective, for what we do, this is useful for us to know. We want to know how the keywords are performing. We want to know impressions and clicks and everything else. But from a client perspective, how do you translate this to what the client is going to see and what makes them say, wow, I'm getting a lot of value from you. I'm going to work with you forever. Or I'm going to tell all my friends about you because signing referral business is way easier than signing cold business. Or I'm going to make sure that we increase our budget with you because clearly the work that you're doing is bringing in results. So let's take a little bit away from paid, which isn't doing as well as organic, and let's give that organic to you. These are the kinds of outcomes that you want from a report that is not what I'm showing on the screen right now. because these kinds of reports really focus on output. They just vomit out statistics. Because I think as well, marketers have a bit of an insecurity issue when it comes to delivering reports. You think, oh, they're paying me all this money, and if I just give them a single page, like, are they going to see that I'm actually delivering any value? Are they going to see that I've done the work? So you think, I'm going to put together a nice 20-page dashboard with some interactive graphs, and the client will realize, because we're doing all this, this huge dashboard, they must be doing good work, right? But the thing is that that kind of dashboard doesn't necessarily bring insights to the client. It doesn't help the client make better decisions. It doesn't help the client see that clearly you are proving your value as your agency. And plus, the data is inaccurate, right? We've already established this. So we're showing 20 pages of essentially fairy tales of data that we hope somewhat correspond with reality. I was working with this one client who, unfortunately, this was before GA4 it was right in the transition from UA to GA4. And I was helping them move their site over to GA4. And when we put the GA4 code on the website, suddenly their visits went down by a fourth. They were like, oh my God, why do I have only 25% of the traffic that I did? Clearly your GA4 setup is wrong. And I went in and looked. And it turns out that they had the universal analytics code on their pages 4 times. So every time you visited a page on their site, it recorded 4 page views. They thought their blog was spectacular. It was only on the blog pages. Unfortunately, it was not. But it also answered a question for them, which is, well, why were we getting all these visits to the blog, but people weren't actually converting? They were, but because there was so much noise from the 4 times universal analytics code was on there, it wasn't showing up. And in GA4, there's a nice checkbox where you can say ignore duplicate hits. And so that meant that GA4 was showing the more, accurate, for lack of a better word, data. And that kind of client conversation is really tough to have because the client's reaction was, you've set up the tracking wrong. So instead, we went through and we discussed it. And that meant that, the last several years of reporting that this client had done had essentially been made up because it wasn't based on even close to real data. And that's a tough conversation to have. So again, as your agency, it isn't just like, oh, hey, your analytics are screwed up. Sorry, I fixed it. It's more, all right, so we know this is true. How can I help you have this conversation with your boss so you don't look bad? And that was a long conversation that we had. And I ultimately ended up, talking to their boss and saying, all right, so here's what's happened. This is really common. You're not the first people who've seen this, because that was true. It was not the first time I've seen this happen. And so we went back and we revised the reports. We cut off the traffic by, a fourth. We basically divided everything. And then we had a much more accurate year-over-year comparison to go forward. But yeah, it was a super tough conversation to have. And I think by supporting the client through that, you build a much stronger client relationship. So bit of a segue there, but that's a good example of, this is what you can do with your clients when you really have their back. So I want to think about changing up these tired old reports with some new metrics that tie what you do to the results in a much clearer fashion and sidestep the inherent inaccuracy that's found in analytics. So my question for you is, how efficient is your marketing? Efficiency is a metric that I use quite a lot. Did I make it up? I might have. I'm not sure actually where it came from. We've been using this for a few years now. But in my definition, efficiency is a measure of how efficient your marketing is, hence the name. How many people saw your stuff, and then how many people ultimately did the thing that you wanted them to do. You skip all the other funnel parts. You just go from top to bottom, and you just work with those 2 numbers, divide them, and there's your efficiency. And the reality is you can pick any 2 metrics you want for the top and the bottom. One of the common ways I measure this is by looking at reach and conversions, but really you can plug any 2 numbers into this. And I have some more examples further on. They don't even have to be in the same data product. For example, one really common efficiency measure that we look at, and this would be for a client where we're working with them, not just on SEO, but we're working with them on ads and social as well, or we're just doing their paid team as solid and actually including them in our reporting as well. And so typically, for example, I'll look at the number of impressions that we had for all of our clients' properties across all the different places where someone could have seen our clients' stuff. And then we would look at their transactions. And for this client, let's say they have a physical store location or several physical locations. Let's just add up the number of transactions that they had both online and offline. And then all we're doing for our efficiency metric is we're taking the number of transactions and dividing it by the number of impressions. This is their efficiency. Because what I want to know is that when we do work, when we do SEO work, when we invest in new channels, when we change up their paid ads or whatever we're doing for that client, are we seeing sales go up? Because attribution, as we've already discussed, is broken. Site visits are broken. So therefore, the only real inputs that we have are, did more people see our stuff? Did more people buy our stuff? Just these two metrics that live in completely separate places that we are dividing for them. And so this is what it could look like in a chart. You can end up with a chart like this. This happens to be in Looker Studio, but it doesn't matter which tool you use. Add a trend line, and then you can see how the efficiency is changing over time. We can see, for example, that for this particular client, and this is real client data that I'm showing you, they're getting back on track after a tough winter, but they aren't quite where they were around this time last year because, the economy, in case you've missed it, is a little rough right now. So what can we do to fix that? And even though, for example, overall numbers might be up, if I looked at just their impressions and clicks, I would see that they're up. But because less people are actually converting, in this case is what we're measuring, are their number of transactions, this shows us what's really going on behind the scenes. And so, yes, of course, impressions are up overall. Transactions are up overall. But that percentage isn't quite translating as much as it used to. We aren't turning impressions into purchases at quite the same rate. So are we hitting diminishing returns? Are we not doing as much of a great job of convincing people? Is there a new campaign that isn't performing as well as it should? Maybe the client decided, you know what, I'm going to try billboards or radio ads. And that turns out is actually a waste of money after all. These are the kinds of insights that you can get from an efficiency metric. And you can try out efficiency for other metric combinations. You don't just have to stick with what I just showed you, impressions and sales. That is a really nice top level efficiency metric to look at, but it is not the only combination out there. So for example, something else we talk about is how efficient your website is when it comes to different devices. In this case, the outer donut is looking at sessions by device. The inner pie is looking at transactions by device or form fills by device or whatever your conversions happen to be. And so what I want to know, do the slices on the donut and the pie, do they match up? Are people having a difficult time with mobile, for example? There are no numbers on this chart. There are just slices of information. And so this can be a kind of chart that you show to somebody who say, the CMO or the CEO, and they don't have to look at numbers. They can just look at this and say, hey, you know what? Our mobile is performing slightly better when it comes to conversions. That's great. Or often, for example, if you know that their website is total garbage and is doing a horrible job at converting people, especially on mobile, then what you're going to see, and what I often see, when we start working with clients with bad websites, is that blue section, that desktop is, the size, the donut, it looks like the way it is, but that mobile slice is significantly smaller than what you see in this actual chart. And this is the one chart that you can use to get a budget for a redesign. It has exactly 0 numbers on it. Instead, they are visually looking at this. And I think as well that as SEOs, we work a lot with data. We use spreadsheets all the time. We're used to data in tabular format, but other people who are not us do not enjoy looking at tables. So by thinking about how can I present this data in a different way, pie charts, people make fun of them, but they are useful for these kinds of things where we're visually looking and seeing, do the slices match up? Anyone can look at this and draw an insight from it. You don't have to be technical. You don't have to use technical words. And when we report on these kinds of things, and when we include these reports to clients, you'll see on the screen right now, there's actually a real screenshot from one of our reports. We have what we call microcopy. We're including a little bit of explanation. The outer circle shows sessions by device. The inner circle is conversions by device. Big differences in composition can indicate user experience struggles. That's all they need to take away from it. If these slices are mostly matching up, great, we're good. We don't need to do anything about this and we can move on. So again, this is the kind of insight that you can bring instead of saying this is the percentage of people who are on the site via this device. You can look at it and you can kind of see what the percentages might be, but the point of that is not the actual numbers. The point of it is making sure that we're doing a good job with the website. And because we're only recording people who actually showed up in GA4, in this case, or whatever measurement tool you're using, we know that, we don't need to worry about ad blockers. It's a percentage of the overall. We know we're not capturing everybody, but the people that we are capturing, they're doing a good job at converting. And efficiency as well can help you get past those attribution gaps. So for example, let's say you are, and I'm going to use a North American example, Old Navy, or really, any large retailer. If you've ever signed up for the Old Navy mailing list, they send out 80,000 emails to every single person on their list a day. They must send out millions and millions of emails. They have one of the most aggressive email marketing programs I've ever seen. But my question would be, if I was working with Old Navy, does the number of emails that you send out correspond with your sales? Because it's not like people are going to walk into a store and hold up their phone and say, I am here because I got an email. Nobody's going to do that. They might not use the coupons you included, but they might still be spurred to purchase or not. So how many emails did you send? How many transactions did you have? There's your efficiency metric. Another one would be, let's say you did all these technical SEO changes on a website. Did you see an increase of revenue as a result? Compare those metrics because, as we all know, technical SEO changes aren't finished in one day. So here's the number of issues that you have. Here's the number of change. Here's the amount of revenue that you had. So you had, 28 SEO fixes that we did last month, and we saw the revenue increase by this much. We only did 5 this month, and the revenue didn't increase quite as much, right? Again, there's another efficiency metric that you can look at. Another question would be, did we reduce churn with our new learning series? Let's say you're working with a company, you've decided to publish a number of posts focused on teaching people how to use the product, but also generally why this client's product is better, of course, as we do in marketing. And as a result, are you seeing less churn, less people leaving the product? Then you can take that further and say users who saw these posts are less likely to churn, but that top level metric compares the work that you did, that input, with the churn rate, and that's the output. So now that I've gone through these examples, I really want you to rethink not just what you're reporting on, but how you're reporting it. I already talked about how tables, we use too many of them and we should use less, but you want to include some ideas in terms of how you design your reports and what you deliver to your client. Here's 3 numbers I want you to think about. 5.26 versus 5.3 versus 5. Fundamentally, if you know that something is converting or key eventing in GA4, which is the silliest term, I can give another talk about that. If something is converting at 5.26% versus 5.3% versus 5%, will that percentage, will that precision that we have in those decimal points truly change the decisions that we make based on this information? If not, then why are we presenting these values with 2 decimal places of precision in this land of imprecise data? Right? Why are we giving this illusion of precision that doesn't actually exist? So what I would encourage you to do instead would be to use directional data in your reporting. Instead of trying to achieve that precision that frankly is just not available to us, we should be speaking in directional terms instead. So what do I mean by directional data? This points to what you need to know, what happened and where the trends are. I used to say trends, not absolutes. I've said that for years, but I think this term of directional reporting is a more accurate way of capturing this kind of data. So in terms of how to introduce the idea of directionality, I want to go over some directional questions that you're probably already asking yourself, questions that you might already answer in your reports for your clients. What landing page is doing a better job of driving signups? Is our organic search traffic increasing or decreasing? Does this video encourage people to buy our products? These are already directional questions that you've probably been asking yourself, your clients, your data, your entire marketing career, but now I want you to answer them with a directional method instead of aiming for that artificial precision that just doesn't exist. So going back to the first question, which landing page is doing a better job of driving signups? Here is a table that you might already have in your reports. You have a landing page, you have sessions, you have number of key events. If I gave you 1 second to look at this table, could you tell me which pages are doing the best job? You'd look and see, well, I see that 35 key events off of the homepage and there's 14 off of the Sunshine Coast Pest Control, and that looks good, I guess, but I don't know about those other pages because they have so many sessions. Instead, this is exactly the same data, but instead of showing the numbers of sessions and numbers of key events, I am instead showing them as a percentage of the overall amount. Again, this is in Looker Studio. For the metric, you just say, show this as a percentage of the total. And now it's really obvious where the gaps are, where we have these pages that are driving in huge amounts of sessions, but very few actual key events. And we know this about this client. These are more reference type posts, but it also means that we can find out some things like, are the pages that we really want to make sure are doing well? Are they doing well? Are some things that we can do to improve the number of key events that we get from these pages? And so here's a comparison of the two. It's much clearer and more interesting to present it as a percentage of the total, and it removes that whole, well, I saw 12 form fills and this report says 9, so your report must be wrong discussion, which I'm sure you're having with your clients. The reason why, they would see 12 form fills in their CRM and you would see 9 in your report is because of ad blockers or people saying no to cookies. You can hide from that, but you can't hide that you actually filled out a form. Right? So again, it removes that idea of precision and instead focuses on that output. Next question, is our organic search traffic increasing or decreasing? So to answer this, in the past, what I've used is what I call a rolling dashboard. This shows the weekly trends for the past year. Dark blue line is current, light blue line is past. There's some micro copy that I couldn't include on this slide, but I explain all this above for the actual client itself. And then I break it down by specific time periods, and then I compare those time periods by the previous period and then the previous year. So for example, if we look at organic search 180 days, it's looking at the last 180 days compared to the previous 180 compared to the same 180 last year. So I look at this and say organic search is down 5.4% compared to the previous period, but it is up 20% when I look at the previous year. Great. Again, but it over focuses on those actual numbers, which may or may not actually be accurate. So instead, I'm going to change this up. So the percentage changes are the focus instead. I'm going to remove the decimal point on the percentage change because, again, is 24.2 versus 24 meaningful when you're thinking about an entire year of data? No, it is not. We'll still include the numbers, but now you can see they're also rounded to the nearest 100, again, to remove that illusion of accuracy. And if you want to know how to round numbers like this in Looker Studio, I'm going to be publishing a blog post on my website in kpplaybook.com next week that goes through exactly how to do this process in Looker Studio. So here's the two compared to each other. The bottom two rows are significantly less overwhelming, and we're removing that illusion of precision again. We're just focusing on the numbers. Are things up or down? Yes or no? Last question I'm going to go through. Is this video encouraging people to buy our products? You put the video on the site, or, your client, I know this has happened to you, has said, I made a video, I'm really proud of it. Can you put it on the site? I'm sure it'll drive more conversions. Will it? Let's find out, right? How can you tell? So in GA4, I've created two audiences, a positive audience of people who at least started a video, and then a negative audience of people who never started a video at all. And then in the report that we would include to the client, again, another table, because we all love our tables, you might have a table that looks like this: people who watched the video and people who did not watch the video, and the number of key events that they had of each. But now, if we go back to our friends, the percentage of total, it's pretty obvious who the winner is. Actually, that video is doing a good job of bringing in more key events. Congratulations, client. You did make a good video, and I'm glad I put it on the site after all. Even though I was skeptical it was going to convert, it did actually work. And also, I just have to say, in terms of client relations, when this happens and the client is actually right, just tell them they're right. It'll really make their day. So here's both options so you can see how much clearer the second option is. Plus, remember, tables are boring. Use graphical elements to make them more interesting and to prove your point more easily. And for these examples I've shown you, yes, I'm using GA4 and Looker Studio, but you can use any tool you want. You don't have to use GA4. You don't have to use Google Tag Manager. Use the tools that make sense for your specific situation. If you are entirely based in Europe, GA4 is kind of a privacy issue right now. Matomo might be the better choice for you, and that is totally fine. I don't care what tool you use. These reporting principles that I've shown you can be applied to data really in any specific place. It doesn't have to be GA4. It doesn't have to be Google Ads. Use the tools that make sense for you. But that being said, I really want you to think about these principles when you're putting together that reporting. There's a few more things I want you to think about when you start to make these reports. And when you go back after the session, you're looking at reports, you're like, ugh, what do I do now? First question, how will your client view the report? If they're going to look at reports on their phone, don't design for a desktop experience. Make that report mobile-sized. It's just one more thing that can annoy a client by making them pinch and zoom every time they want to see how things are going. Use the words that your client uses to describe their goals. So if your client says to you, I want to make sure my phone is ringing, then you'd better say in that report, how many times did your phone ring, not phone call conversions. Use the client's own words in the reports. And then the last thing, I want you to check, how does this client engage with the report? Whatever tool you use for reporting, make sure it has the ability to track when a client is viewing the report and how often they're viewing the report. What pages are they looking at? Where do they linger? What are they engaging with? And if you have that information, please actually look at it. I know how busy agency life can get. And sometimes you think, they're looking at the reports. I don't need to dig in here and take a look. But it's way easier to keep existing clients than to get new ones. And one of the ways you can keep existing clients is by making sure they're happy with their reports, because we sell invisible things. And reports are one of the real tangible things that you can actually look at, you can print it out, you can touch it. So you want to make sure that your client is absolutely engaging with that report as much as they should. Now, what other insights can you bring to your client? So I recently did a great webinar with Andy Crestadina where he walked through how to use ChatGPT to pull insights from GA4 and email marketing and other places as well. Again, don't have to be using GA4. This just happens to be the tool that we were talking about. It's well worth your time. It's an hour. It'll change how you bring insights to your client. I really recommend checking this out. That QR code will take you directly to that post. And of course, these slides will be available in the PDF that is being sent out to you after this. All right. Thank you very much for the talk today. I hope you enjoyed this. That QR code there will take you to my link tree where I have links to this and so much more. And it was great talking to you today. Thank you so much for having me.
Major thanks to Dana. Thanks a lot for the presentation. That was great. And I will be quoting you. We sell invisible things for sure. Then reporting is a major thing for agencies. We know how painful it can be. So thanks a lot for sharing all of these insights with us today. And we are moving to the Q&A. Already have some questions in chat. First one is from Justin. How can I automate SEO reporting without missing the important details? What's your approach to set it and forget it reports? Nice one.
Yeah, the most important thing is really thinking about, like, take the time at the beginning of the project to think about what are the metrics that are really going to matter for this client. So we have, I mean, as I mentioned, we use mostly GA4 and Looker Studio. We have a template that has basically everything in the kitchen sink, everything we might possibly need for a client, because it's way easier in Looker Studio and probably other tools as well to delete stuff than it is to add stuff. So we start with that, and then we think about what's going to matter for this client. What are those directional metrics that I talked about? What are those efficiency metrics that we're going to need for this client? And then make sure to set up your systems as much as possible. So for example, using Zapier for automation can be really key. We have one client who has a people counter because people coming into their show homes is actually a really important metric for them. And so we automatically get an email report with the people counter results, which we then push into Zapier, which then takes the numbers and puts them in a sheet, which automatically gets pulled into Looker Studio. Take the time to set that up manually at the beginning, or it is manual work at the beginning to set it up, but once it's done, it just works. And then the client thinks it's magic, honestly. But like using automation tools like Zapier can save you so much time for reports. Like we got better things to do with our time than copy and paste numbers from one spreadsheet to another.
Right, exactly. Thanks a lot for the answer. Another one from Alex. Can SEO reporting help spot less obvious trends or relationships between different metrics?
Yeah, Alex, you asked this early on, so I hope that what I went through in the rest of the presentation helped answer this particular question. I think something else too that we're looking a lot at is really make sure too that the reports that you give to clients don't look at like the diagnostic type stuff that I talk about, like how many keywords were in each of these, like how many words were in each of these queries, for example, like seeing, are you targeting like high volume, top level terms, which maybe, you know, especially with the advent of AI overviews aren't as efficient anymore. Should we be targeting queries that have more words in them, for example? That kind of reporting, you probably don't want to give that to a client, but that's a reporting you should have for yourself for sure. And so definitely that kind of reporting can help you spot those less obvious trends and look at that relationship between different metrics. But again, that isn't necessarily something I give to a client unless they're really into it. But even then it's like, their job isn't in SEO. This is probably not something you want to give them.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Thanks a lot for clarifying. Next one, how do you tailor your SEO reports for different audiences, like tech teams versus execs? They talk about the same things, but use different language, right?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things that we do is we put out, well, we give a survey actually at the beginning that everybody has to fill out. And one of the things that I ask them is like, what are the questions that you're asking of the data right now? And knowing the answer to that question is a really good way to get their language. So as I mentioned, like use the words that client uses. So if you're reporting to like the tech teams and the executives, they definitely use different words. So make sure to give them those surveys or have those conversations, note down what they say and how they say it, and then make sure you're using that terminology when you talk to those different teams. And it's something where you don't have to be like, look, I used your own words, like don't mention it. But invisibly, again, like there's a book called Selling the Invisible, which if you haven't read, I really do recommend it for agency services. But a lot of the things that you talk about are like those removing those invisible friction points, like don't make them think, right? So by using the words that they use, you're already speaking their own language, you're making them comfortable, you're not making them work hard to understand the report, and it can really make a world of difference in that client relationship.
Right. That's a great piece of advice. Thanks a lot. And we have some several questions actually from Diego. I will break that into pieces because that's going to be overwhelming. But how do you balance data from various sources such as an SEO tool, GA, GSC, and yours ACRM when compiling a report?
Yeah. So again, that's where I talk about, you know, at the beginning of the project, think about what are going to be those final metrics for that client and asking them in their surveys, like, what are the top level things? What are the things you've asked of this data? Another question that I'll sometimes ask as well is there a report that actually changed your mind about what you were doing and what was that report, because that can also help me see, what kinds of reports are they already looking at to make those different decisions. So really the balance of data that you end up coming with really depends on what's going to make the most sense for that client. There isn't necessarily a hard or fast answer that you need to make sure you're relying on this or that or whatever else it is. If you are presenting specific sources of data, though, like Google Search Console, I always make sure to include a caveat on the page itself. It's like, this data is not 100% accurate, so that clients don't get over focused again on those inherent inaccuracies in the data.
Great. And continuing with the question, which approach do clients find most convenient? Is the approach that's convenient for clients also convenient for you?
Oh man, it depends. I mean, our default, I would say, is Looker Studio, because clients do want to have a dashboard that they can like look at whenever. And some clients do look at it whenever, some clients don't. And if that's the case, again, we look at the data and we're like, would you prefer to have a call once a month to go over some information? Or do you just want an email? Or, and really checking in with them as well. Is this make the most sense for you? So for example, for some of our ads clients, because they aren't necessarily a high volume client, because they weren't really, communicating on a regular basis, we might only talk to them once a quarter, but that reduces their management fees, which they're happy about. They feel like things are running, they're looking good. Obviously, we're keeping an eye on stuff, but we don't need to have that level of communication because they don't feel that they need it. Whereas other clients, they like to talk to us. The only way they'll actually get things done is if we have a regular call for accountability. So they prefer that kind of communication style. So again, this is going to depend on a client by client basis. It's something you need to work into your operating procedures, unfortunately, but I think, customization is the way to go here. Or you can decide, I'm only going to work with clients who want this kind of thing. That's also a totally valid way to go. And if that's the case, make sure to build relationships with other agencies who do things slightly differently than you do, so that if you do get a lead who's going to benefit more from like that, let's say you want to be low touch with your clients and you have a lead come in who wants to be high touch, send them to an agency you trust who can provide that kind of high touch relationship. And that way you look great, and that agency will also send you business back the other way.
Nice. That's a great advice. But anyway, we should be flexible here and be ready to adjust to what clients find best. So yeah, Diego is sorry for the long question, but I think we nailed it. So no worries about that. And I think the last one would be, what API tool would you recommend between Portermetrics or Zapier to pull Shopify data to Looker Studio?
Yeah, that is a great question, Okusami. So I would say I'm not actually super familiar with Porter Metrics. It is on my list of like, these are things you could use. What I've used personally in the past is a tool called Airbyte, or Stitch. Those are also they're called ETL tools, where they pull data out of different sources. I think the tool itself doesn't necessarily super matter. I think Zapier, though, might not be powerful enough to pull data from Shopify because Looker Studio itself doesn't actually store any data. So it's got to go somewhere else. So Supermetrics, for example, has a connector for, can get right into Shopify. But what you might want to do is take Shopify data and push that into BigQuery, and that can be your storage bucket that you then pull into Looker Studio. So I would say investigate some of those other options. Ultimately, the tool you choose is going to make the most sense based on your own specific recommendations. Another tool that sort of provides a UI on top of BigQuery data is called Analytics Canvas. They also have a fantastic UA backup service. We are like a month away from losing UA data forever. So if you have not yet backed up your UA data, please use Analytics Canvas's UA backup service, or any backup service at all, really anything. I'm going to be publishing a blog post soon as well about I made a quick dashboard you can use if you just need to download a little bit of data, but like, don't lose that data forever. Definitely download it at least at a minimum. So don't leave that to the last minute, please.
Great. Nice. Thanks a lot. And I think that's a great piece of advice to wrap up our presentation. And actually, we're wrapping up the event. Thanks a lot, Dana, for being such a great speaker and sharing all of these insights with us today. That was amazing. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And just a couple of minutes before we wrap up, for sure, speaking about reporting and automation, I will mention our report builder, which is a great go-to tool if you want to customize your reports and templates and automate or set up the report so you can literally set it and forget it, or you want to structure your data wherever you want. So go for the SEO Ranking Report Builder, and I'm sure that it will make your life easier with your reporting processes. And you can, of course, try it out with our free trial, along with all the other tools that are included. So just a kind reminder for you to provide your business email, and you will have more limits, access by a QR code, and register for the free trial. Also, a kind reminder that we have an SEO ranking community. I've already mentioned it. We have great discussions there, great people with like-minded people in the industry dealing with similar challenges and problems, and sharing the advice. So if you want to join us, just use the link in chat or the QR code here, and we will be very much happy to see you around. And of course, we would like to see you as one of our followers or friends in our social media. So here are the useful links. We will also be sharing all of these presentations and materials after the event. So you will see all of these here, and you will be able to join us in social media. Thanks a lot. We are going to wrap up. Agency Growth Day is coming to an end, and I want to thank you all for joining us today from different parts of the world, from different time zones. We really appreciate having you here and asking your questions, leaving comments, feedbacks, being engaged with the event. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the event. I hope you got all the valuable insight that you expected to get here to grow your agency business. And SEO Ranking is always here to support you with our powerful tool set. So take care and see you at our next events.